Of Talking Tech. We're joined today by Matt Whitworth, founder of PureType. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Hi, Nick. Great to be on.
Thanks. Good. Maybe the best, as probably every traditional podcast starts with, it would be good for our viewers for you to maybe give an intro into you, your background, kind of how we are or how we've got to today and where we are.
Absolutely. So very briefly, on a personal side, I'm Matt. I live in southwest London with my wife, Carol. Career-wise, before PureType, and I'll get onto that in just a second, I was the CTO at a fintech company called Solarium. And before that, I was the CTO of a small hedge fund called Asparagus Capital. So I think what's kind of tied my career together so far is just learning new things. And I guess in software development, that means languages, technologies, and new problem domains as such. So the idea with my new venture, PureType, is that I'm hoping professional software developers can learn as easily as possible alongside their daily work.
So maybe let's elaborate a little bit on that, because you're being quite modest. I know, amazingly well educated. Started your career as a developer. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of C++ originally, and then have moved towards TypeScript, Elixir, that kind of technology. What made you, I suppose, first of all, maybe what is PureType for everyone, and also what made you come up with that idea?
Absolutely. So fundamentally, the idea with PureType is that, especially when you're new to a language or new to software development in general, what you're looking for is feedback. But often, especially in high-performing teams, you want feedback from your seniors and leads, and they're often pressed for time. So there's really a means for developers to learn as easily as possible, because they can get some feedback from this, from PureType. It's a sort of a system that helps with that, but also they get a personalized knowledge journey, something that allows them to keep on learning without it feeling like they need to go away for a couple of hours and read a book. Those kind of bite-sized knowledge pieces are the way I learned, and you often learn by doing and getting that feedback on doing stuff as well.
And was there a particular event or something that happened that made you think, like, this is an interesting gap in the market, I could see mileage? Was there, what was the idea behind the brainchild of it? What made you come up with it?
Absolutely. So like every good startup, one good way to start is to solve your own problem. And one of the things I had in Solarium, we used Elixir, which is a great language. It's a really powerful tool, but it needs a bit of introduction. It takes a bit of time to get people up to speed. The hiring pool, even at the moment, is still pretty small. That doesn't mean that you should give up on technologies like that. They can often be a competitive advantage, but the kind of tools and the process that I was using to get people up to speed, that was the sort of thing that I thought, okay, there must be better tooling for this. It's all about quick feedback. It's about giving people bits of information that are relevant and they can use straight away and retain. And so what I found was I sort of had to do a lot of that myself, and it was great, and it was really valuable getting people up to speed, but there definitely was that knowledge gap and that tooling associated with that knowledge as well.
So then putting that together, if I'm a developer now wanting to upskill or learn new technology, how would that work with PureType? What would I be doing in terms of subscribing to you as a business or downloading your tools? What process would that follow?
Absolutely. So what would happen is you might say get a job using Elixir. You might say, I have no knowledge of Elixir whatsoever. You might do a bit of preparation, a bit of independent reading, but what the company will want you to do is contribute, obviously, as positively and as soon as possible as well. So PureType will really be two things. One, it'll be an assistant. So when you're coding or when you're seeking a review from others, you can actually use PureType to help improve the style and the form of the code. It's one thing to write code. It's another thing to write code well.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the first part. And over time, the knowledge platform that is the second part of PureType will sort of figure out, okay, this guy needs a little bit of help here, a little bit of reinforcement here, or follow-up here as well. So it's sort of taking a lot of the lower level activities and really going for something that allows the manager or the lead to help you plan your development, your career. I think what we find a lot in a lot of companies is that people are managers and leads especially are spending too much time on the low level stuff when they should be helping their team members grow as quickly as possible, as high level as possible.
And I mean, I think that's probably the same for any industry, and any, you tend to have managers that are down in the weeds where they need to be helping with the more high level stuff, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, what's quite interesting. This feels like PureType could be really attractive to engineers trying to upskill themselves and get better at whether it's Elixir or different technologies or tools, but also businesses looking to improve their whole development team, or if they're integrating new technologies. Is that, I'm assuming you're like approaching them both. What's the kind of utopia? How's that looking?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit like Facebook starting out at Harvard. It's a small college in the northeastern United States, but the principle is a pretty general one, and Facebook obviously has scaled up to billions in the years since. So you could say that this kind of learning technique applies for any sort of learning whatsoever. So starting off actually in Elixir, because that was the gap. I know people who are suffering that problem as well, and the same comes with hiring there. And really following that, it's going to other languages and technologies where there's this desirability gap. There are companies that want to hire for this skill. There are people who want to learn it, but somehow the two aren't sort of interleaving together as they should. And then, I guess, as you pointed out a bit earlier, this is really good for any kind of skill acquisition. It's a sense of, looking at what somebody is doing, offering as much feedback as you can, but using that pattern of feedback to give them a real boost up in their knowledge journey, so to speak.
And I suppose that, because you mentioned there were two parts to it, and specifically the knowledge platform, which I assume that's the really important bit, which is the feedback loop. How is that? Well, one, I suppose it'd be good to know around what technologies you've built PureType in, which I assume it is Elixir and some of the associated tech, but how that works, and does that evolve as someone uses it more? Does it learn from their behaviors, how they develop? How does that knowledge platform kind of evolve?
Absolutely. So the goal is to provide a bunch of techniques. So it's not just go read this, but it's also pair with this person about this subject. So a lot of it is the elements of a recommendation system. Given what I know about you, you should go and do X. So that's something, you have it for YouTube videos, for example. You learn based on past behavior. And the past behavior in this case, among other things, is what has the assistant had to help you with in the past. And if you stop needing their suggestions, it means you probably learned that lesson. If you haven't, then it probably means that you need to carry on learning that lesson, so to speak. So in terms of the technology on which this is built, you're right to say Elixir here. It's good really for two things. One is the web interface. It's great to bring something up to speed and obviously give a bit of the UI and UX experience for this, allow people to visualize it even at this early stage. And then it also wraps around AI and ML libraries pretty nicely, actually. And Python was always the default choice for that, but you can see other languages coming into that space as well.
So for me, the bit then, as a layman, especially coming into it, is I'm assuming there's also then some sort of not test, but a kind of like leveling process of, are you a beginner with Elixir? Have you used it before? That first bit, which I assume is relying on someone, how much data they give it and feedback they give it, and then it starts that process. Is there sort of a staged system to that?
Yeah, that's one of the open problems to solve at this point in time. Yeah. Where can we get information from elsewhere? It might be their public contributions or something like that. Some, data from GitHub, for example, as well. But you're quite right. Getting a good initial picture is a great starting point on the journey. And at that point, the rest of it's about the journey. And of course, you never stop learning, or shouldn't really.
Well, you kind of answered my next question with that, which was about to say, where do you get all the information? Which I suppose, as many sources as possible is what that is.
That's right. And the best source is always going to be the activity of that person as well. So that's where the assistant comes in. So they sort of feed together quite nicely.
Okay. So obviously it's really exciting. It's an ever evolving product and toolkit that you're offering. How do you see PureType evolving over the next couple of years? What do you envisage for it? What do you see it looking like, this time next year?
Absolutely. So the first phase is actually getting something out that people can use. So I'm at the point where I think I have an early pilot version within the next couple of weeks, certainly getting some feedback on that, working out what are the most helpful elements of the product and what can be postponed to a later date, and then going for more popular technologies, but ones where there are good training materials. There's a good approach already. JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Java, those big ones, but knowing that that approach has worked in another market already, because the space for those kind of dev tool and assistance is quite large already. And then post that, we've talked about how it's good for people on an individual level, but if you're a lead on a team, what you really want is a good picture kind of what everybody else knows.
Yes.
So at this point, it's something you keep in your head. It's a very fuzzy thing of, I think they know this, and I think they worked on this a couple of months ago. Imagine having a setup where you could just glance at a big heat map and say, this guy doesn't know much about this. He could talk to this guy, or this guy is going to leave, for whatever reason. We need to make sure that people are picking up X, Y, and Z as well. At the moment, that's a bit of a haphazard process and obviously holds organizations back after that as well. So the long-term goal, pretty much out of all of that, is completing that kind of feedback, knowledge life cycle, and giving people, giving companies, giving individual developers a really good sense of where they truly are when it comes to the knowledge required to do their job.
What's interesting, actually, I hadn't realized that. I understand the process and the idea around being a tool to upskill. So it almost sounds like for it to have the best effect, it's sort of a constant loop back of, you in basic terms, you've completed stage one, here's your feedback, here are your improvements, check back in, stage two is now this, and I'm assuming it's something you want to integrate into some sort of learning product, but there's a consistent thing with businesses on a continual basis.
Yeah, I think it's a sense of, yes, when you're beginning, there is always I need to start at stage one or chapter one of the tutorial, and I finish at chapter N, for example. But the key part here, I guess, is that people are always learning, but that in the average day, you're kind of learning in 500 different directions at once. So it's a bit less of a structured program, but you can definitely tell when somebody is good at something and when they still need to learn as well. So it's more about, it's less about the structured training and saying you're 25% complete here, and more a sense of where do they feel like they are, how fresh are their skills, that kind of fuzzier picture of day-to-day knowledge and learning.
That makes sense. And the you mentioned you're just about ready for a prototype. I'm not going to pin you on when it's coming out. How do you go about from initial idea, inception of it, developing it, to now product or a prototype going out, to how do you get a big enough, I suppose not, or user case or catchment that people then use it, which I assume you then will use the feedback and that looping system to do it. How long does that take, and how big a user group do you need to get a view of that?
Absolutely. So it's more than one user, and what is nice about these things, and I think you'll find this in a lot of good platforms, is if you can use data from different users. They don't need to know the specifics of one another or share data, but if you have as many people as possible feeding into that recommendation model, or feeding back on whether they thought that resource was useful or not, that's the real value that accelerates at quite a pace afterwards as well. So I'm certainly not going to be drawn to how quickly it's going to grow and how fast it'll do that, but this sense of having that network effect of having more users contributing to that knowledge graph, knowledge map, if you will, that's going to be beneficial for everybody using the platform too. And
you might not be able to answer it because you're keeping it under wraps. There's going to be some massive launch, but I'm just interested personally. How do you go to how do you launch that first? How do people hear about, obviously doing podcasts with us, and we'll obviously share it with our viewers. Is how do you as a business go about launching that first bit and getting that interest into someone using it?
So I think, first of all, it is a wait list. You sort of want to launch with enough people. Second is pilot users, getting that feedback, making sure the fundamentals of the product work, that it can it can analyze issues and feedback into a central system for that as well. And I think third is it should have that properties of I find this a really useful assistant. It either costs next to nothing or not very much each month. I might as well install it. And you can see it with tools like GitHub Copilot, as the developers were quite happy to pay out of their own wallet for it, because it actually helped them personally and professionally as well. So I'm hoping I reach that kind of stage, but something where people feel like not only are they improving professionally, but they're also improving for career growth. They want to learn this new language and they feel like they need a bit of feedback to do that. And that's tapping into that and getting that kind of prosumer market going. That's going to be a key business development goal, let's say, at least in the early days.
Completely. And I can see, I suppose, we're kind of looking into crystal ball, which is hard to do, but I'd imagine that there must be many different types of languages and tools that this idea could evolve around. Is one of the long-term plans to spread, from a technology point of view, spread into which areas you go, or where you're trying to help people with tools?
Yeah, I think so. And obviously there's a generative AI aspect to this. Or at this point in time, it sort of makes sense to keep it to very concrete, almost human recommended items for now. But if you have that network of people feeding in to this, then you already have a good mechanism for keeping good resources and eliminating bad ones or bad recommendations or bad summaries as well. So I don't see PureType as going into the different thousands of languages and technologies. Manually, I certainly see some generative angle to that as well.
And what do you, these are all, I suppose we're talking about, hopefully, successful launch, lots of positive feedback, lots of data. What have you thought about in terms of envisaging challenges that you see in your particular industry or PureType as a business? What do you see as hurdles that you might face?
As hurdles, I think there's a sense of generative AI is a really good technology and it will help developers. And every time that we've made software development easier to do, we've ended up with more software developers. So it's making sure that there's a messaging not around we have to go and automate things straight away. There'll be lots of software developers on the dole queue 6 months from now, but rather it's a bit like self-driving cars. Absolutely fantastic objective to aim for, but there are definitely incremental gains that we can make today that are really helpful. And things like keeping into certain lanes is something that is an assistive technology in cars. That kind of thing is going to be useful for developers as well. So I think there is a sort of danger around the messaging, and that means people investing in the wrong technologies or technologies that aren't suitable for this. And I think to kind of finish off my answer there, one element is you still need to hire developers who know the language, that know the technology in the problem domain. Otherwise, you're essentially putting toddlers into fighter jets. You can physically do it, but it's definitely not a good idea for business continuity.
Well, it's interesting that, I've done so many recently talking texts around AI, and the common question from a lot of our viewers is this the end of developers, or is this the? And as you said, it's what I find more interesting is actually the more technology, the more advanced everything is, actually the more opportunity it does or creates, and more opportunity for good people to upskill and get better. And I think that it's just a case of embracing it, making sure that you use the right tech for the right problem, but also, I think, as you said, really importantly, is not just jumping on the bandwagon because it's now new and shiny, and it's using the right tools.
And I think it's to kind of add to that, it's a bit of a reckoning with the identity of a software developer. What really is the job? And for me, it's always been problem solving and communication. And writing code is a really nice side effect. It's kind of fun to do, but that shouldn't be the primary element of the job. And so I see less of a threat to that as others do. You still need to do the first two for the third to happen.
Yeah, you're solving a problem. You just happen to be using a different bit of tech or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's interesting, because I think also the initial feeling with a lot of, which I'm sure you'll remember with Telerium and technically testing people, was the first thought with AI and how that was going to be involved in the process, whether it was ChatGPT or Google, Gemini, whatever it was, like, oh my God, have they used it? What have they? We're getting a lot of clients who are like, we want them to use it because actually that could be the best way to solve the problem. All we'd like them to do is explain well, I've used it. This is the reasons I've used it, because this gives me a better, quicker outcome. And I think it's just getting your head around that and embracing that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always been about communication. If you're writing code or writing a plan or asking a question over Slack, some other human is going to read it. And I think that's the fundamental core skill. If you don't have that, it is hard to progress.
Well, look, really, really kind of you to join us, and really kind of you to give us an overview on PureType. I know we've worked with you for a number of years at Celerium, and I'm looking forward to watching your journey. Maybe if it's okay with you, it'd be great to check back in 6-12 months, see where we are on that journey and how the initial product launch has gone and how it's developed from then, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Matt. And to all our viewers, obviously see you on our next episode.